support the PD team. And a favorite winter essential of mine is watching Harry Potter on repeat. Even if it's in the background, that is something that gets me through the winter. Kind of a guilty pleasure, but I know I'm not alone. Ooh, good, Nikita. Larry, thank you. All right, as you introduce yourself, your program, and your winter staple in the chat, I would like to ask other members of the PD team if you have any words of welcome for our group today. John?
I appreciate the opportunity to welcome all of you in this most frigid of weeks or cold spells. And I'm really excited about today's topic because it really crosses all programming, ESL, ABE, ASC, and I think not only its applicability, but its ability to engage you so that you might share not only your questions, but perhaps most importantly, your perspectives or approaches to dealing with differentiated instructions and learners on that spectrum of skills, knowledge, and ability. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Anything before we get started from Kim or Becky?
In the way up at the top of the chat, you'll see a couple links for today's the last day for the numeracy survey. Well, actually, if you do it tomorrow, it'd be fine too. That we're looking at for that, and that's the numeracy training initiative we're looking at getting going in the next month or 6 weeks or so.
Thank you, Becky. Thank you, Kim. Anything from Becky, or we're good to go?
We're good to go. I'll have a couple comments at the end, Laura, but for now, I think take it away.
Awesome. Sounds great. Okay, why differentiated instruction? As I contemplated why this topic, I thought of this, that I find it important, relevant to all of us, as John said, at all levels of adult education. It allows us the ability to serve the differing needs and mixed abilities of our learners, and it contributes to both effective instruction and student retention. I also was reminded that differentiated instruction is highly research-based, and it draws on different important tenets of adult education, including learner-centered education or student-centered learning and adult learning theory. One of the examples that has come up pretty frequently in our local program at LSS Center for New Americans has been how we deal with SLIFE and non-SLIFE students in the same classroom. And if you don't know what SLIFE refers to, it is our students with limited and interrupted formal education. So in one NRS level, we may be serving both students that had interrupted education, maybe pre-literate or non-literate in their native language, alongside individuals that are highly literate and perhaps completed an advanced degree in a formalized education setting. So they learn in different ways, they have different needs, but they're testing in at the same level when we assess them. That gives us a very rich opportunity to apply differentiated instruction, and that's just one of the examples you may relate to today. The overview of our training time today is we'll have a brief time to define differentiated instruction. We'll consider some of the research and the resources available on this topic, and we'll have abundant time for instructor roundtable discussion. For all of those of you who prepared a few thoughts for today's conversation, also we'll have some time of Q&A and some closing clarity on differentiated instruction. Here are objectives to define it. Then we will move into identify what makes a group multi-level. Again, look at some research and resources and share your applications and best practices from across the state, and collaboratively address any pain points or lingering questions that you have on this topic. So here is one of our definitions that comes from LINCS, which is the Literacy and Information Communication System. Literacy, Information, and Communication System. And you'll find many wonderful PD resources online through LINCS. And they define differentiated instruction in this way, or DI. It's the planning and delivery of our instruction considers varied levels of readiness, needs, and interests. We employ this approach with different routines and tools to engage our learners. And I love that phrase, engage learners. We give them lots of options as well for demonstrating their mastery of material. A second definition comes to us from the American Institutes for Research, and I liked this definition as well. I like that it enables us to plan strategically to meet the needs of every learner. It's really rooted in that belief that there's variability among any group of learners and that we have a responsibility to adjust our instruction accordingly. The approach encompasses planning and delivery, classroom management techniques, including grouping, which we'll talk about today, and the expectations of our learners' performance. So one example that came to mind right away for me in regards to this is I've been working with some of our evening instructors, and one of them has a student who's very, very new and has been struggling with PTSD to the extent that he wasn't even showing up to his second hour of instruction. And as we were training in some of our new on-call instructors, I pointed out that the goal for this student is that they become acclimated to the classroom setting and gain some socialization and some comfort in a new culture and in the classroom setting. So at that point, the goals, the expectations of students are differentiated. The goal of that learner was to get him to class and to build some comfort for him given his unique needs, whereas other students in the room are ready for focusing on retention and decoding, explicit decoding instruction, for example. Okay, question for all of you. What is something that makes each group of learners multi-level? So please contribute in the chat at least one thing that makes your learners multi-level. Oh, thank you, John. Digital literacy skills, levels of reading, excellent. Different experiences, life experiences, schema, levels of comprehension. And of course, we're referring to both native English speakers and non-native speakers, anyone in adult education. Different first language, levels of education, age, grade, Kim, and differences working with memory. That's a good one, Nikita. Previous formal education and trauma. Fantastic. Okay, preferences, learning preferences, Amy says. Learning orally versus print. Okay, those are some great ideas. Thank you for adding those, and you can continue to put yours in the chat if you have not yet. Okay, and here are a few more, and your comments are also, I think, encompassed on these lists for adult education and literacy learners on the left side, and specific to our adult English learners on the right side. So the left column would include adult English learners as well as native English speakers. Things like learning style, preferred learning style. Digital literacy skills would apply to all of us, all of our learners. And even those lived in traumatic experiences are likely to cross. They will cross country of origin and language of origin. And adult English learners, a few unique elements such as comfort with the Roman alphabet, although that might be the case to an extent with our native speakers. The status, one's status in US culture, and cultural expectations of formal education. I've come across that as a learner, a feature of our learners that makes it multi-level for us. Access to English outside of class. And really the proficiency in 4 language skills can factor into the multi-level nature of our classes. You will have received an email with these links to research and resources, both for adult education and literacy learners, as well as English learners. There are 2 that we could find that I sent to you on differentiated instruction, and one is a fact sheet that AIR developed as the TEAL project, and that is the Teaching Excellence in Adult Education project, and they have a series of fact sheets, one devoted to differentiated instruction. And the English language acquisition multi-level resources, there are several really great resources there, and you are all invited to select just one from amongst those options to preview for today's discussion. So if you did that, that's fantastic. We look forward to hearing some of your thoughts. Here is one nugget of research from that TEAL fact sheet given to us through the American Institutes for Research. And this alludes to the instructor's differentiated instruction being the instructor's response to learner differences through adaptation of curriculum and instruction based on these 6 dimensions. So these 6 dimensions that you see in the diagram are meant to be simultaneous or sequential or as needed. They flow in whatever way we deem valuable to the students that are having those different needs. And one of the elements we attend to is learner profile, which includes strengths, weaknesses, and gaps. And at the center, you see adaptations and learner grouping as our 2 key approaches in differentiated instruction as we navigate these 6 dimensions. Our adaptation may be in the realm of content, leveling the content, for example, the process that we'll be using in terms of the activities we employ in the lesson. The product would be the end result that our students are producing, the way that they are demonstrating their mastery of the content would be the product. The learner's interest, their profile, and their readiness are also dimensions of our differentiated instruction. And now for our time of discussion. So we'd love to hear from all of you. And these are our 3 key questions for this part of our training today. what resource or research did you reference? And it may even be something that was not included in the resources I sent your way. So for example, one instructor decided to utilize Burlington English, and you're always welcome to reach out to myself or anyone on the PD team if you have other ideas about how to approach these T3s. But we did have someone say, there are ways you can differentiate really effectively using Burlington English curriculum. And then we had another instructor ask, could I use ReadWorks and the different levels of text available through ReadWorks to explore this need of differentiated instruction? So what resource did you reference? Can you summarize a few key points from that? And it's okay if your presentation is a bit informal. We're sharing with each other today and really excited to hear your thoughts and comments. And then third, how does this connect to your wisdom and experience as an instructor? What does it look like in action in your classroom? Who would like to lead us off by sharing some of your thoughts on these topics? And you are welcome to unmute, and you're welcome to have your camera off if that works for you. For those that are unable to do so, please do feel free to put your thoughts in the chat, and we will continue to monitor those. Teacher Kate, could I ask you to start us off?
Sure. So I am the teacher who did ReadWorks. It's something that I had known about for a little bit. Teacher Heather and Teacher Diana used it quite a bit in their classrooms. And the reason I wanted to do it is starting next month, my 130 class will be a combined class with our 2 highest reading levels. So that puts us, I have students that have tabbed as low as around the 2nd grade level and others up to past 9th grade level. So with that huge differentiation, I really wanted to use this tool to make sure that everyone was getting appropriate reading practice reading practice at appropriate levels. So ReadWorks is a program. If you don't know it, it's a free program that has an amazing library of articles on every subject under the sun: US history, world history, science, culture, virtually anything you can imagine at kindergarten level up through, I think it's past 9th grade. You can make a free account for yourself and your classes, add students to it individually. You can assign articles to a whole class or individual articles to individual students. I've been doing that because I've been assigning different articles to students at different levels. And then there's usually some comprehension questions that they can answer. Once they submit it, you as a teacher can see what their answer was. Some of the answers are multiple choice. Some are for the higher level students, like a short answer where they're typing it in. So far, it's been working really well. What's been really beautiful for me to see is not just my students. I can see them doing better in these readings. They're starting to get more questions right, but seeing the computer literacy building up. When I first introduced this to my class 4 a couple weeks ago, you know, they're something as simple as opening up the computer, scrolling around on a keypad. They were really struggling, and I'm seeing their motor skills and their digital literacy skills getting more honed with this. Today, they were able to open it up with almost no help from me, and that made me so proud. So I think it's a really good tool, and I plan to continue to be using it more. And it's free. If I didn't mention that, free is good.
Very exciting. Thank you, Kate. David, would you have a few things to share?
Sorry, there we go. So for those of you who don't know, at LSS, I teach the online classes. So I teach all of the levels, and those are broken down into just 3 classes. And most of the time, those classes are combined because we have such a small group of students. So I'll have beginner students with intermediates, intermediates with advanced, and many times every single level is there at the same time. So I did look at those resources that Laura sent out. And I was reading through it, I already do that. I do that. I do that. So I'll just speak towards what I do. One, let me see if I can share my screen. Nope, I can't. Never mind. So with, for example, Wednesday mornings, class 1, class 2, and my focus is those beginning level students. Other students will mostly listen while the lower level students get their practice. With, so I'll have them like read through like the weather forecast. All the lower levels get a chance. After that, level students will read through it again, so lower level can hear fluency and better pronunciation. Other higher level students also help translation and clarification. That's something you have to watch closely because that can go on and on and on and on. Volunteers are also essential in my class. I think teacher Karen is with us today. She's my volunteer. And so she has helped those students who had no reading ability at the beginning. So she worked with them in a breakout room to bring them up to a point where now, after only a few months, these 2 students are a key part of the class. They're able to participate quite well at the, and we're using that low beginner in Burlington, for those familiar. So yeah, using other students in the class as teachers and volunteers.
Thank you, David. Who would be willing to share next? You can just unmute yourself and jump right in.
Laura, this is Becky. One of the things I was struck by, I actually read through the links article, and it made me think of a webinar that it was actually part of the Pro Literacy virtual mini conference that Kim and I participated in, I believe in November. And one of the sessions that then we shared with our instructors had to do with writing, especially for very, very beginning level students. And exactly as you were talking about, the expectations change for that product based on the level of the students that you're working with. So if you've got someone who is that, and they fit into that SLIFE category, you're not going to expect them to produce a complete sentence when you begin doing writing activities with them. Where if you've got someone who's got a little more educational background, they might be able to make a simple sentence sooner. So just adjusting your expectations for the levels of the students and the abilities of the students, and recognizing that any product is a valuable product and a valid product for an assignment that you're doing, and then building off that as you work.
Great example. Thank you, Becky.
To relate to Becky, yeah, that's been my approach ever since I started teaching. I learned that concept of I+1. So, and that's when you talk about student-centered approach, I take that as like a singular. Each student has a +1 in all levels and all different skills for that individual student-centered approach like Becky was talking about.
Very good. John, thank you for your comment about engaging through the use of forecast icons, numerical temperatures. Yeah, they're the different modalities that are available that makes it multi-level and engages different learner preferences. Thank you. So the questions here are, what research or resource did you reference? Any key points, and how does this look with your students? Who else would have some thoughts to share on this?
I can go. I want to second Kate's use of ReadWorks. It is so valuable in my Lit 5 class because my students are at different levels of vocabulary understanding, that with STAR, to give them individualized or group assistance, I needed to find a way to split them out. And so we discovered ReadWorks, and I would just echo Kate. When they started, they were a little bit like, where do I go? What was the password again? So after they mastered that, or if they forgot, they learned to ask their neighbor, right? I wasn't always the source of information, which was really nice too, as well. In my Oral 2 class, we build a conversation, but I'm always got in the back of my mind a more differentiated or difficult conversation question back and forth for my higher levels that are getting ready into 3. And they need to provide more information in that conversation. Maybe they need to provide the why or the where, instead of just giving a one answer, right? And my low literacy class, we do our reading, but then maybe I am working with the lowest levels on learning how to decode, but the higher level students are looking for patterns. They're looking for, or they're reading back and forth with each other, or they're learning some fluency with phrase markings. So I've pulled that through, but I did have a question for anyone that maybe has tried News. It was in the resources, and I was wondering if that could be used in my oral classes to generate conversation. I just was wondering if anyone had tried that. Haven't had a chance to try it yet with our trainings that are going on here in the office, but curious if anyone's used that resource.
Can you repeat the name, please, Diana?
It was just called News in Levels. That's what I wrote
Is
in
it this one called Breaking News English? I was looking at it. I only
one.
looked at one, to be honest, one of the examples. And my biggest takeaway, I think I got hung up that their level 0 was totally not level 0. But it did look nice that you could see the same article at several levels. So I think that Diana, you might
Maybe
want to
that.
look at that.
Okay.
But especially you're telling me you're in Lit 5. I think you'll be able to find stuff. I was looking for 0 and I didn't see 0.
Well, it was more like it was a video. Is that what you saw was videos, or was it?
Oh, maybe I looked at a different one. I was looking
Okay.
at this one called Breaking News English, and it has the same news story at various levels, kind of like your ReadWorks, but they're news
Right.
stories.
Yeah.
And I was disappointed in what they were calling a level 0. But other than that, it looked like it was nice. You could see the same story in 1 to 3 paragraphs at various levels. So you might look into that for your lit class, but
Yeah.
I probably won't use it in basic.
Right. I think I did look at that too, and I don't think I can use it in my lowest levels. But this was like a video, and I was wondering if it had audio to it that I could go slower with it. But I was wondering if maybe I could show it with no audio and then elicit English from that experience that they saw. But I didn't know if anyone had used that yet.
Diana, I have used video from online sources with more emergent levels of oral and literacy skill learners, and it has been, I've found it to be pretty effective to turn off the audio and have them generate vocabulary or learn more simplified vocabulary for their level of proficiency using that video with the voice, with the audio off.
That's what I was wondering. That's what I wanted to do, but I just didn't know if anyone had tried that.
I've done that with
Okay.
citizenship class instruction using the Smithsonian videos, for example.
Okay. All right.
So
Thank
I
you.
think you've got a good idea there.
Okay. Thank you.
Heather, would you have anything to add? I know you're quite savvy when it comes to leveled online resources. Okay, that's no problem.
Laura, her
Sorry to hear
microphone
that.
isn't working right now. Yeah.
Sorry to hear that. Anybody else have some thoughts to share?
I'll
if
add
you're
one
not-
thought. I think it was either adapting materials for mixed abilities or ideas for multi-level classes. One of those articles mentioned that adapting to different learning styles and that some students, just silence and listening is their learning style to begin with. One student started December of 2022 when we started the online classes. She joined the class with her daughter. They shared their phone. And she just wanted to sit in the background, just listen and absorb. Now, meanwhile, she's doing homework on Burlington for 20, 30 hours a month. Well, fast forward six months later, her daughter's working full time. She joins, and she's one of the most active students in class. She's leveled up to class 2. So even just giving students that option and freedom to just listen and absorb information.
David, when you say she's active now, does that mean she's active with her attendance, or she engages, she verbalizes, she responds, she
Yeah, she's
prompts?
active in class. Yes, she's
Uh-huh.
always been, she's one of the most consistent attendees. And so in class, she reads, she answers questions, she asks questions, she helps other students.
Did her engagement start slowly over time, or was it something happened and then she was,
I
highly
think-
engaged rather than more of an observer listener?
I think once her daughter started working full time and it was just her on the video, that was a little push that maybe she needed.
Oh,
And my classroom environment is so supportive of each other. So that's another part of it. Other students were just encouraging and like, wow, you've improved so much. So that put a smile on her face
Yeah.
and gave her confidence.
I think that point probably can't be overemphasized, the fact that we need to, like you all do, nurture, cultivate, maintain, and protect those safe learning environments for students who are bringing all of these different backgrounds, contexts, traumas, and insecurities to that classroom. And so it's real heartening to learn that in time, David, she's really begun to bloom. So kudos.
I can add a takeaway that I had from this.
Thank you, Amy.
I watched a New American Horizons video, which was listed as one of the resources that you sent. And that teacher actually talked quite a bit about grouping techniques that she used in her multi-level classroom. And it made me think of a technique that I had used quite a bit before COVID when I had big classes. Of course, there's different techniques. You can combine like levels with like, or you can combine high with low. And I have found that much of the time my students stay engaged more if they're paired with like, if they don't feel like they're getting like input from the other student, and the other student's reasonably able to understand them, and they can circumlocute with each other at the same level. That depends on the activity, of course, but much of the time I tend to pair like with like. And a way to do that in my large class, I actually, again, this was before the pandemic. Soon, I hope my classes will be big enough I can use it again. Just these cards. So I have, let's say, six of each number. And as the students come in the room, maybe on time or maybe late, I give, let's say, number 1s to the high students, 2 to the medium level students, and 3s to the lower ones. Of course, I don't tell them what those numbers mean. I just hand it to them. And then when it comes time to pair up or group up or whatever, I tell them, find somebody with the same number as you, and that's your partner. And I switch it up to, like, maybe tomorrow if I do this, I'll make 1s the low and 3s the high. So students don't always think, hey, why am I always getting a 3? And then I just have to keep track of what I was doing that day. But that seemed to be a good technique, especially in a large class, because it took quite a bit of time to say, let's see, you pair with him and, stand up and move. And, that took quite a bit of my time. So this was a way that they can make their own groups. And that's worked well. And by the way, that's referring specifically to my speaking classes when they're talking a lot in pairs or small groups.
Thank you for sharing that, Amy. I've noticed our teachers, even with slightly smaller classes, grouping their students in a really strategic way. And I've seen some of that evidenced in Diana's mentorship and collaboration with NALCO, where they've anticipated students that have a higher level of proficiency and those that have a lower level of proficiency. And her lesson plans really was excited. I'm excited about those developments for you, NALCO, that you have those names listed and you have it anticipated in the lesson plan that if they do come to class that night, you have specific activities and tasks for them to work on separately at a certain point in the lesson.
Yes, thank you, Laura. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, that's good. Okay. Yes, thank you, Laura, for the feedback. And yeah, I just do this sometimes for that I will write down on the notes like that. For it's also for my reference, and then just that's way I don't forget who is the lower level learner and who is an advanced level learner. So then that makes it me, when I go into the class, then sometimes I can make more quick adjustment into the lesson plan, like if I need to change the lesson. So yes, that's it.
Thank you.
Yeah, good point now. With that, do you find that 3 levels are sufficient? Like Amy's example as well, 1, 2, 3, high, medium, early level. Are those sufficient for grouping purposes generally? Regardless of class size?
I'm not, yeah, that's actually a good question. I'm not sure. I mainly teach the pre-literacy level now, but
Mhm.
I just don't really see the advanced classes
Okay.
now, but that would be, I'm assuming it's beneficial, but I want to ask other teachers for that question. I mean, if I can, sorry.
Sure you can. Does anyone want to comment on that? Have any feedback for Nalco about 2 levels, 3 levels? How many levels is enough? To
For
meet the needs
me,
of your learners?
using the 3 levels, 1, 2, 3 was enough. I did actually print, I have cards for number 4, and I never ended up really using them. So for me, 3 was okay, but you know, I'm sure people's classes are different.
I could see using really like what Amy does, and especially that would be useful if you're trying to do like groups. I could see Amy throwing in the 4 if she wanted to do different groups, or she could just use 2. She could just do a 1 find a 2, or she could be like 1's find a 3, 2's find a 4. If she wanted to mix the, if you want a mixed ability group for some reason for certain activities.
And thank you. I think that was Debbie who had mentioned that. Do any of you find that you like to alternate? So sometimes like groups, but for certain activities, you like a more advanced with an earlier level literacy learner for various reasons? And if so, what are those reasons?
What I did today, when I had my mixed level class, it was a small class today because of the snow, but I had 3 students who were around a 2nd grade reading level, and then one lady who was higher. I think she was about a 5th or 6th grade. I put her with, I think she might be one of the lower students in the class. I put them together for 2 reasons. I think they would have worked well. I thought they were going to work well together, and they did. I thought and it also just happened that the 2 ladies were from the same country. So had there been any confusion, they could have spoken the same language to each other. They worked beautifully together on this particular assignment. So it worked out well. Now, I think it just depends on the learners in particular. Some learners have that beautiful teacher's heart and they're more than happy to help a lower level student. Some are just, and I don't say this disparagingly, they just don't have the patience for that, or they just want to go and do their own thing. I think you have to just gauge the students and take it individually.
Excellent points, Kate.
Yeah, I would say it depends on the task as well. Sometimes one part of a task is disproportionately more difficult. For example, asking certain questions and versus answering them, because questions are hard in English. Forming a correct question is pretty hard. So that could be something that a higher level would do, and then maybe the lower level student could just give a very simple answer. So a task where the 2 parts of the task are differ in difficulty, that could be a good use of an unlike, how, you know what I mean? One high student and a low one.
Sometimes I do a high with a low if I haven't differentiated the reading. So we're just reading a small paragraph that goes with the content, and I want them to practice the pronunciation. Okay, so now we've gone over this, and you're going to read your partner, and your partner is going to read to you. I'll sometimes pair a high and a low so that the high one can help with the pronunciation of words. Yeah.
I think another consideration when you're thinking about how many levels to differentiate for in your classroom has to be, what is your capacity as a teacher? Because I mean, if we wanted to fully differentiate, we would just be teaching each individual learner at their individual level, right? And you can get stuck in that and thinking, oh, if I just add one more level, then it'll be perfect. But it's never going to be perfect. So I think keeping in mind that you don't want to overextend yourself in terms of how much planning you're doing or how much you're going to be trying to do in the classroom too has to be a consideration for you when you're thinking about differentiation.
Yeah. My most vivid memory of massive differentiation was with a ESL level 1 group. And I had identified 7 different levels or 7 different areas of need within one classroom. It was a very large class, but a strategy that worked well for me was I prepared a folder for each of the 7 levels and had distinct activities and tasks in each one. And depending on who came for that day, I would pull out 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 of those. And also depending on whether I had a volunteer to assist me that day, I could use those, and they were just available for me as I needed them moving forward. Capacity to have a 7-ring circus is not very practical on a regular basis, but it helped me to just conceptualize what I was looking at and what those needs were for future reference. And they were color coded as well. So I knew I had my blue group and my yellow group, for example. I noticed in the comments, Heather, I appreciated that you shared that example about a differentiation technique you used with an advanced learner who had a specific career interest. And so you utilized Burlington English in one of the career specific curricula for that advanced learner to meet her specific needs during class time. So thank you for sharing that about the career section that was available there.
I found it. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, good. My microphone works. I found one suggestion in the article that I was referencing, which was also referenced in a lot of the slides. So I'm not going to be going into that anymore, but it talked about always starting a class as a whole class and then kind of going to the levels. And one of the suggestions was to use a vocabulary list. And I've been doing that for a long time, not specifically thinking about, oh, it's going to help different levels, but I just pulled out vocab before we read a story where I thought, well, they might have issues with that. And then we just went through that, but it's working out really beautifully because the students help each other. The higher levels know more of the word, so they're trying to explain it to the lower levels. Some of the lower levels are learning to ask more questions like, what does that mean? Or how do we say that? And the way the list is, I just have on the one side, just the vocabulary listed and then a blank line. So the student can do whatever they want with it. Some of the higher levels, they just copy the word. Others will write it in their language, or some of them will leave it blank, but it really turns out that particular tool works really well with a lot of different levels, and the students enjoy that because they can talk about it beforehand. So when we actually read the story, they're not so lost in it because we already know some of the words. So I'm definitely continue doing that.
Silke, I think that's a terrific example of one of those unifying opportunities, in this case, vocabulary. I think with the New American Horizons videos, if I recall, the students, despite their different levels, they went on a field trip. So they all went to the same location and saw presumably the same things, but then when they returned to the class, they could address it at their level appropriately. And I think whether you're English ESL teacher or a post-secondary teacher, affording the students a common unifying event. And if you can't go on a field trip, maybe a video clip or an infographic or something that people can access at their level is a way that then you can build those dialogues around a shared moment or occasion. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
That's excellent. Excellent comments about the unifying event or experience, even if it's a video, and Silka with your vocabulary list. I love resources like that can really be leveraged in different ways. And vocabulary lists are low prep, but really relevant to all. And with those advanced learners, someone might copy the word, someone might translate it into their native language, another may write a full sentence. So with the same tool, we can pretty quickly level those tasks. Thank you so much for those thoughts. Are there any lingering questions or challenges that you have with your learners? Thanks to John and Heather for those additional comments. Heather added some thoughts about grouping. Heterogeneous and homogeneous are like ability and different ability groups. Changing the expectations for each. Oh, and asking a student to be the leader or teacher. I've observed NAUCO handing out cubes that were from a numeracy training, colored cubes, and the student that receives in the in-person classroom, a student that receives the colored cube is asked to lead the activity or be the teacher. So there's some really, really simple ways to initiate that and identify who can be the stronger in the pair to help lead an activity. Here are a few closing thoughts, hopefully some closing clarity, but really it touches on some of what all of you have already shared in regards to the first point, grouping strategies. One of the strategies that we leverage really consistently in differentiating our instruction. Pairs, groups of 3 are effective. Breakout rooms for online instruction, teamwork, moving from whole class to small group. Likability and crossability is another way to talk about the pairings. And TSTM, for those that remember the teaching skills that matter, professional development experience that we had last in a previous year, project-based learning, problem-based learning, and integrated and contextualized learning really lend themselves to team approaches and differentiating instruction, because in a project-based experience, students can have different roles based on their skill set and interest. For example, that lesson planning sequence that was mentioned about beginning together as a large group and then assigning level specific tasks to the groups and then ending together is a great way to approach lesson planning, and something that I learned and practiced in my STAR training back in the day. So I think this really crosswalks well to those of you who participated in STAR training. And fourth, preparing and integrating online resources to level our content and tasks. There were some additional resources mentioned in the chat about Common Lit and Quill. You know, there are some really great resources there that can help make it easier for us to meet the diverse needs of our students. These were our objectives for today. I hope you feel that we were able to touch on all of these objectives. If you have lingering questions, please don't hesitate to reach out or to work together on that in your local programs or even statewide. Feel free to reach out. So a few announcements. I know we have a few. These are a few reminders. If you would like more information about these, please do check your inbox where you have information about the Language and Literacy Institute. South Dakota has the green light to participate in this virtual offering on January 25th and 26th. That institute is specific to adult ESL. And another offering is the WIC Child. That's the WIC Community Innovation and Outreach Project is partnering with actually Lutheran Social Services to provide a series that is open to the public and mostly virtual, but there will be some in-person offerings for those that reside in Sioux Falls. And that's available to anyone in the community that might benefit from those offerings. John, Kim, and Becky, what announcements do you have?
I don't have any announcements, so I'll save time for Becky's updates. I would just add though, it feels like maybe we didn't mention AI's role here, and I think at Summer Summit we had a couple good sessions that addressed the ability to have content and have that AI help us develop different reading passages based on Lexiles or grade level equivalents. So I don't know if that's a pain point for many of you, having the resources and or the time to prepare multiple resources. And Laura's seven colored binder, but certainly, you know, we can take a look at that and consider that as we work with vendors for Summer Summit 2024. Becky?
Yeah, I just wanted to say a couple of words about T3 for February. We are going to be kicking off a little bit of a look at the evidence base behind student retention. And Kim, Laura, Amy, and I were able to go to an NRS training last June that dealt with retention. And so the resources for that February T3 come directly from that training with a few additions as well. But we're really looking at, I've completed kind of a mini literature review of the evidence base behind goal setting and persistence as related to student retention. So that'll be coming out to you sometime in the next couple of weeks. We want to give you some time to read through that. There's summaries of the articles. They're long summaries because I wanted you to be able to get the full gist of the article from just the summary, so you didn't have to go out and read the research piece. So the intent is not for you to read, there's 10 of them. The intent is not for you to read all 10 of those summaries and be well-versed. Look for one that draws your interest, read one or two of them, come prepared to discuss, ask questions, provide feedback, talk about your experiences. And if when you get that literature review, you have any questions about what you're supposed to do with it, please don't hesitate to reach out to me.
And I learned there's a new AI thing where you can feed all these in and it'll give you a summarized summary if you're kind to it.
She learned that after I did all the work.
I know. I finally found a reason for AI.
While everyone gets a chance to read Amy's comments in the chat, I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank Supervisor Laura Smith Hill for her preparations and facilitation of today's session. Well done, Laura. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, everyone, for participating.